Hi, folks. It's happening. Democrats are feeling their grip strangling the American public release. Whether they like it or not, the party's over. It's time to pack up and head back to reality. The land of Oz isn't going to be around for too much longer. And while some Democrats have been having a hard time coming to terms with this new reality that they find themselves in, others are choosing to take strategic steps to accept this brave new world that they're about to exist in again. And I say again because this world has existed before. It's called a place that's guided by common sense rather than special interest lobbies that have been funding the Democrat agenda. Anyway, today we're going to start out by looking over at MSNBC and Morning Joe.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so. What
we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
Now, a lot of people are going to have different opinions about this. People on the right are likely going to see it with a lot of skepticism. The Democrats are uncool right now. Everybody's doing the Trump shimmy in every single sports game that you watch, and I'm not joking. From soccer to football to the UFC, John Jones just celebrated knocking out a man by doing the Trump shimmy, okay? And then going up and handing him his UFC belt. The Democrats are out. And of course, this is going to cause a lot of Republicans, people on the right, who have experienced every sort of misrepresentation, lie, and vilification as a result of associating with Trump coming from the left. They're going to see this with skepticism. They're going to think that this is an opportunistic moment for Democrats to choose to come to terms with the fact that Trump is president. And meanwhile, on the left, I think that a lot of people are also going to be equally upset, and they're going to disavow what Mika and Joe did because the left loves to eat itself. For anybody who may not know, Joe and Mika were actually relatively friendly with Trump before he ended up becoming president. Their relationship ended up getting frayed as a result of Trump running for president as a Republican. And then when Trump ended up winning the presidency, their relationship went basically to nothing. And Joe and Mika became very opposed to Trump's presidency, and Trump also didn't mince words whenever he had to talk about them. All that being said, I actually think this is a good thing. I think that anybody who's admonishing them, whether you're on the right or you're on the left, I think you're kind of in the wrong for this one. Isn't this what we want? We want the country to come together regardless of the side of the spectrum that you're on. We want people to go back to having a rational dialogue, whether or not you agree with a person. I think it's a great step that they went down to Mar-a-Lago and ended up talking it out with the president and perhaps not coming to an agreement, but just having a dialogue like civilized adults. Because That's the part of civil discourse that we like to reward, right? That's what we want to be able to have in this country. Not just a constant finger pointing and villainization and just attack. We want to be able to have serious conversations about the very serious issues that we're facing in this country so that we can hopefully arrive at reasonable solutions that don't tear the country apart in the process. Being from an extreme left-leaning network and taking this step where you're essentially, you know that you're going to get hit from both sides. Within the left, they're going to question your credibility now. They're going to say you associate yourself with Hitler, with this awful dictator, tyrannical wannabe leader. On the right, they're going to question your motives. And I think both sides have good reason to do that. The right has good reason to be skeptical because of how viciously they've been attacked for having a very popular, charismatic leader with a specific vision for this country, which in 2016 when he ran seemed fringe, but now it seems more mainstream than ever. And on the left, I mean, people on the left have been bludgeoned over the head with the idea that they have to hate everything that's on the right, and that if you endorse or even speak about or host Donald Trump, that you're a Nazi. And they will have to come to terms with the fact that they have gone so far beyond reason with their villainization of this man that they are, in fact, the only ones to blame for the collapse in dialogue that we've had in this country over the last few years. There's no better time than now to turn around and come to terms with the fact that you are wrong. While there is something to be said that it is more beneficial to do it now than, let's say, 4 years ago, or even 2 years ago, or even 1 year ago, we have to take moments like these where reason and common sense rule above party loyalty, and we have to take it as a victory. Because at the end of the day, while it's okay to hold people accountable, we also don't want to keep further fracturing the country. That's the mistake that we did in the last few years, to constantly attack people for their political views, to villainize them, and that hasn't given us anything good. Moving on to the ladies of The View. Do you think that they took this news well?
I will never sit with him. I don't think I'm going to have to. I don't think I'm going to have to make a decision because I don't think I'm ever going to get invited. And listen, the truth of the matter is, as we know around this table, that it is hard to criticize and denounce the abuses of power by Donald Trump when he is president. We have been there before. Mm-hmm. It means threats. It means death threats. It means retribution against your family. It means crazy things showing up at your house. It means lawsuits. It means all sorts of things. We've done it before, and if we have to do it again, we will do so again.
Nobody believes you're a victim, and you're going to have a hard time convincing anybody of the opposite. The reality of the situation is Ana Navarro holds a very comfy job sitting on ABC, pretending to be a Republican while parroting every single talking point from the Democrat opposition agenda. She endorsed Kamala Harris, and now she's saying that as a Republican, as a self-identifying Republican, she refuses to sit down with the current president of the United States, who is a Republican. She constantly admonishes and condemns her own party. Let's just call a spade. Ana Navarro is pretending to be a Republican. She's grifting a Republican identity on a Democrat network, a Democrat far leftist program, so she can subvert things done by Republicans and the president with some shred of credibility in the eyes of Democrats. Because if you're a Republican or an independent, you're watching Anna talk and you're like, this person identifies as a Republican? They speak like a Democrat. The reality of the situation is that what Mika and Joe did is what should be done by every journalist in the country. Your interest when it comes down to the president should be to speak with him about anything and everything and ask him questions so you can further understand what this man is bringing to the table. Because the moment that you just create this wall and you say, I'm not going to speak to this man is a tyrant, he is not worthy of me asking him questions, not only are you reducing your own power in this dynamic by not actually having an open conversation about your disagreements with this person that you seemingly hate, but you're also contributing to the division in this country. Now, it shouldn't be news to anybody that people on The View are saying this. They've been railing for the last 2 weeks, ever since Trump won, saying that the reason why Trump won is half the country's racist, is misogynistic, that they hate black women, that they are Nazis, that if you voted Kamala Harris, you should disown your family members and friends who voted Trump, and while at the same time saying, there's too much divisiveness in this country. Bro, I don't know how to say this any other way. You're the culprit. You don't have to look any further than the mirror to find out why the country's so divided. And instead of praising two journalists who are on your side and took a legitimate risk, career risk, to go and cross that line that has been set by Democrats, a line which has actually deeply impacted the credibility of mainstream media and liberal journalists in the eyes of the American public, you choose to further aggravate the divisions in this country. And by the way, it doesn't make you brave to be the opposition party and to just retreat back into your shell and point fingers. Dialogue is much harder than villainizing your opponent. It takes humility and it takes a genuine interest in seeing this country overcome many of its profound troubles that we're currently experiencing, many of them financial, economic troubles. A lot of people are struggling in this country. It takes a lot of humility to be able to cross that line and do the right thing. And that is, regardless of what Ana Navarro and these other kooks on The View say, crossing that line is the right thing to do always. Dialogue over villainization. Nobody wins when you villainize the other side. In fact, you do it enough, that's how people end up getting shot. That's why he ended up getting shot, because of dumb shit like what Ana Navarro is doing right here.
I think there's a lot of people who are probably looking at what Joe and Mika did and find it opportunistic. There are people who change their stripes, or maybe their spots, I should say today, depending on who is in power and what benefits them. I don't know that that's what they are doing. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's a to be determined situation, because right now it's the transition. Mm-hmm. We don't know what he's going to do as president. We don't know what they're going to do if he commits abuses of power as president. So, you know, everybody has to live with their decision. Everybody has to look at themselves in the mirror. I'm good.
The fact that they're changing their mind means that there's a cultural shift happening. And the fact that people like Ana Navarro are responding so viciously with so much anger and resentment towards Mika and Joe, it just goes to show how deep the political divide is in our country. At the end of the day, there's a lot of money to be made being the opposing party. Playing the resistance role is very profitable. That's something Ana Navarro will never admit to you.
Are you talking?
Well,
Okay.
look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news. He is the guy who ushered in alternative facts. He is the guy who attacked 3 black female journalists. He's the guy that revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials for asking him a question. And so I think that this president-elect, I hate to say it, would like nothing more than to have only Fox News cover him, would like nothing more than a state-sponsored media. And I don't think he can be trusted in the way that other presidents can be trusted. This is an aberration.
Folks, let me tell you something. If you're as bothered as Sunny Hostin is in this clip by a conversation that happened between 2 journalists and the president-elect, the 47th president, the most powerful office in the world, you're a partisan hack. There's no other way around it. You have sold your loyalty, which should be to the country, to your party. You no longer have the interests of the country at the forefront of how you guide yourself whenever you're having these kinds of discussions. I know that a lot of liberals and lefties out there don't think this is possible, but it is. It's possible, folks, to have a dialogue with people with whom you disagree with. I know that the liberals and the lefties have been trying to convince us otherwise, that having a dialogue with somebody you disagree with means that you are inherently as evil as them in the eyes of liberals. But it's often the contrary. It's often the people who are just entrenched in demonizing the other side and don't want to hear the argument that are the evil ones, because they're tyrants. They're people, whenever you want to shut down the other side and don't even want to hear them out, you act like they're the devil, they're Hitlerian, they're fascistic. You're not doing any greater good for the country. You're serving yourself and your own interests. The fact that Sonny is questioning whether Joe and Mika are journalists because they chose to go down and speak to Trump says everything that should be said about how the left sees journalism, that it's not actual journalism unless it serves their point of view, and says everything about the current state of journalism. Because nowadays, journalists are considered more morally ethical if they are biased, particularly to the left. And if you show any sort of nuance or desire to speak to somebody that doesn't agree with your point of view, all of a sudden, you're a part of the problem. And to her point, Trump has done this country a great service, calling out the fake news, showing us that, not in the way that she said that there exists alternative facts, but that the media has been selective and has been manipulating the facts in their favor. And it's ironic that she calls out Fox News and says that Trump would enjoy it if only Fox News reported the news in this country, when if you look back at the election cycle, there wasn't even a Fox News debate. Kamala Harris did one interview on Fox News. Meanwhile, Trump went on CNN for a debate with Biden. He went on ABC for a debate with Kamala. And during that debate, it was 3 against 1 because he was the only one getting fact checked. In fact, even some of the fact checks that the ABC moderators did on him were absolutely incorrect. And he fact checked them as they were doing it, and they doubled down. Later, he was proven to be right. So Sonny's entire point crumbles within itself because we witnessed this election. We saw who the unrelenting, biased organizations support, and it's the Democrat Party. The state TV media apparatus is in support of the Democrat Party. ABC, the network that she is on, is in full support of the Democrats. CNN is in full support of the Democrats. MSNBC, full support of the Democrats. CBS, full support of the Democrats. NBC, LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post. I mean, I could keep going down the line. Basically, every single major media outlet is in support of the Democrats. You are the state TV, and you're calling the one network that provides opposition, which is Fox News, Fox Business, and the New York Post, and you're saying that they're state TV. They're the minority perspective. And look, it's never been more evident why the mainstream media lost this election for Kamala, and in the process, tainted their reputation. Because they're incapable of having any sort of self-awareness and understanding that being this divisive is only dividing people against them. Because the moment you wake up and you realize the games they're playing, there's no way you can see it any other way. Anyway, another person who caught the ire of the ladies over at The View is Bill Maher, who to his credit, even though he's liberal, he has been very critical of some of the inconsistencies and the blind spots that Democrats have had, and has actually been very proactively calling them out on his program. And I gotta be honest with you, it's part of the reason why he gained a lot of respect from me in the last 2 years, because he's been willing to do that. He's been willing to be one of the few voices on the left. And I don't even know how left he is. He's like a moderate Democrat. He's a liberal. He's not a lefty. He's not a socialist. But he's one of the few voices on that side who have been willing to call this out. And if anything, it just adds to his credibility, which is what the ladies of The View seem incapable of understanding. How choosing to address situations by leading with reason and common sense is a stronger position than just appealing to party fealty.
Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging. You just lost a crazy contest to an actual crazy person. What a shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election loss as a result of racism and sexism.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class? I mean...
Horseshit. No, she didn't. Kamala Harris was a blank slate of a candidate. She kept flip-flopping on all of her positions, from fracking to the border policy, which she has been pro-open borders for years. She's been about decriminalizing border crossings for literally years. You can go as far, you don't even have to go that far back. In the 2020 primaries, she was literally advocating for that, as well as taxpayer-funded trans surgeries for illegal immigrants and people in prisons. Now, for some crazy reason, and it's totally not because she wanted to get elected, she hijacked Trump's border policy during a portion of this last campaign cycle. She went back on fracking. She started talking about how she was a tough prosecutor and literally completely revising her record as a DA, never acknowledging that she was stricter with parents that she arrested for truancy than she was with serious drug offenders, and that even though she is a former prosecutor, a lot of her policies involved decriminalization of a bunch of different crimes. The ladies of The View don't seem to understand. The ultimate reason why Kamala Harris lost was she couldn't disown Biden and his economy. She couldn't take accountability for being absolutely ineffective on the border wall and actually presenting a genuine and authentic plan that wasn't a ripoff of Trump's to solve the border. And she appeared to have no policies or ideas of her own. She was basically an inauthentic actor, just going on this press tour for this movie they were about to release. Nobody knew who the hell Kamala Harris was. She's this avatar of a person, and that's why she lost. It doesn't come down to racism, doesn't come down to sexism. In fact, if she were a good candidate, I'm pretty sure she would have won. The same way she's been elected senator and DA and vice president. Her race and her gender have never been an issue in getting into positions of power in the government. Her greatest impediment has been Kamala Harris herself.
I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris. It's very clear. It's not only clear by race, but it's also clear by education.
I think instead of education, you mean indoctrination. Also, that graph that she presented, I would also like to see a graph next to that graph showing the gains that Trump had within each one of those demographics. And it would just go to show just how, even though, yes, Kamala Harris had a greater share of Latinos and blacks voting for Trump, but at the end of the day, her support went down. And even though she's a black woman or a Jamaican woman or an Indian woman, however you want to categorize her, a lot of people voted with their pockets. And to just try to frame it as, oh yeah, white people did their thing, let's point the finger at them, is just dishonest. Also, do you have a graph to support your claims on racism as well? Because, Sonny, you live in New York. You live in one of the most liberal states in the country. Your mayor is black. Your DA is black. Your governor is a woman. How can you claim that there's racism in your state? These are the same people, folks, who complain about abortion rights being repealed while living in some of the most liberal states in the country with some of the most liberal abortion policies in the country, and who are also incapable of acknowledging that even traditionally conservative states have voted to have pretty liberal abortion policies. In fact, let's take it back for a second. Since Sunny is pulling up all these graphs, I would like her to pull up a graph that shows the intersection between people who voted for AOC for Congress in New York and also voted for Trump. And that is a huge percentage of people. So much so that AOC has spent the last week, she's gone and done polls on her Instagram. She's done lives and posted several videos talking about this, trying to understand the intersection. And the reality of the situation is Americans can carry two thoughts at once. In fact, they can walk and chew gum at the same time, as the old saying goes. They can know what their local interests are and vote on that, and that local vote can be, and in this case is very incongruent with their federal vote. At the end of the day, it seems like Democrats are stuck in the denial phase of grief. They just have to accept, you lost. Trump was a better candidate. He was a great president the first time around, when you exclude COVID. He's about to be one of the greatest presidents in the history of this country. This cabinet is going to blow all of this partisan bullshit out of the water. It's going to reduce government and all this waste down to size. We'll hopefully get several tax cuts along the way. And that's just it. This country, Americans just want to be prosperous. To keep reigniting this race and gender discussion, it's never going to get anywhere, because at the end of the day, no matter what solutions are proposed, it's ultimately a subjective issue. You can choose to interpret every single microaggression, right? Every single microaggression, I put that in the quotes because I don't even think that exists, but that's a word used by the left. You can interpret every single microaggression or any action done towards you that you see as negative as being race motivated, gender motivated, the same way that Whoopi just a few days ago was going around falsely accusing a bakery of refusing to serve her because of her political ideology when she had no evidence to prove that. You can always apply your own subjectivity of race and gender bias to every single action that you're involved with in your life. That's why Democrats and lefties love to obsess over this, because they know this is the kind of issue that they can keep moving the goalposts. That's why Sonny just sat here and instead of pulling up a graph about racist encounters and how they've gone down or up or however they trended in the last few years, she just sits there and mentions her anecdotal experience without a single story, a single bit of evidence. She says, well, I live every day in the most liberal state in the country, in the most liberal town, one of the most liberal towns in the world, and I experience racism every day. And we're just supposed to take her word for it, because that's how the intersectional pyramid works, folks. If you're at the tippity top of the intersectional pyramid, your experience, your anecdotal experience, cannot be questioned. These people have a reputation that is impeccable purely because of where they find themselves in the pyramid. And that obviously lends itself to just people warping and distorting narratives and events for their own political gain, which is what we're seeing here. On top of that, she never qualifies as to what is the racism that she encounters. Does she feel like she has less opportunities, less professional, in what sense? I mean, she is on daytime television. This is a highly coveted job. She likely makes hundreds of thousands, likely millions of dollars a year. She has book deals. So what racism is she experiencing? Is this the kind of thing where she's in line for a bagel and somebody calls her the N-word? If so, you would know that she would be on The View every single day railing about this, right? So what's the racism? Is it that she goes to buy a home and she is not allowed to buy the home? What specifically is the racism? Now, obviously, I'm not talking about the disparities between the races here. I'm talking about Sonny's specific case. She mentioned anecdotally that she experiences racism still to this day without mentioning a single example. And yet here she is, a millionaire on a TV show, daytime TV show, who's publishing books and being paid to travel around the country to speak and be heard. But she never makes it evident how she's discriminated against, even though she's given all these things. And by the way, folks, I think it's important to mention that a while ago, Sonny did a DNA test and it came back that she was actually the descendant of slave owners. So perhaps she's trying to overcompensate.
And so the notion somehow that is not true. This is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I think you're missing this point.
Let me just finish. And so I've said that before, and there was so much backlash because I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
And this is why people hate Democrats, because they're constantly looking down and talking down to large portions of the electorate. This was Sonny Hostin right now telling 75 million Americans that they're uneducated, that they voted for Trump because they're uneducated, and that Democrats ultimately know what's better for the country because they've gone to college. I went to college, I have a double major, and yet I voted for Trump. I know several people with PhDs who voted for Trump. Obviously, she had statistics there that show that the vast majority of people who voted for Trump don't have higher education, but I don't think higher education is actually a metric that accurately measures intelligence. For example, the founder of Facebook, one of the richest men in the world, Mark Zuckerberg. Did he ever finish college? Nope. He dropped out of Harvard. Another example, Bill Gates. I don't like the man, but he is successful. Multi-billionaire. Revolutionized personal computing. Did he go to college? Dropped out. Never finished Harvard. We could go down the list. There are so many people who never finished college or who never even went to college. Traditional education has only been around for about 100 to 150 years. This whole thing about going to college is a relatively new phenomenon. All the geniuses that we study in college and that we study in school, the vast majority of them are self-taught, are people who would just study and think about the world and theorize. You think Isaac Newton was sitting out in fucking Harvard yard talking about the Zionists like they are now and not even thinking about the theory of gravity, and then an apple falls on his head? He's like, oh, I know what this is. Gravity. You think fucking Christopher Columbus was out here just at UCLA camping out on their lawn for months and then was like, you know what? I'm going to go ask the King of Spain to allow me to travel around the world to prove that the world is round. It is an absolutely low IQ and dumb point to say that because you didn't go to college, you are inherently unintelligent, when we have more cases of brilliant geniuses who never went to college, who dropped out of college and accomplished tremendous things. Albert Einstein was in large part thought to be an idiot for the vast majority of his life. In fact, people have even studied his brain and said that his brain was smaller than the average person's brain. And he's one of the greatest geniuses of our generation, widely considered that. So what we have here are Democrats essentially shooting themselves in the foot once again, alienating half of the electorate by basically being assholes. They're looking down on everybody. We're better than you. We're better educated. We know better we know what's better for the country. When in fact, all that means to me is that if you went to college, you're likely just indoctrinated. If I went to college, I went into debt to go to college. Took me years to pay off my debt to college. Looking back on it, I would have rather gotten that debt and invested that into my business instead of spending 4 years in college and just wasted my time learning things that I don't use to this day. College is a waste of time for the vast majority of people, especially if you're going into communications and a trade that doesn't require you to go to college. If you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, sure, you have a need to go to college to get training so you can get licensed. It makes sense for you to go to college. If you're going into communications, marketing, business administration, college is just going to end up being your background. It's not going to end up being the thing that makes your career. And if I could take it back, I would not go to college, start my own business, and learn as I go. Take all those loans out that I ended up taking, take them as SBA loans, and start a business. I would be so much further ahead if I had done that. And there are a lot of people who do that and genuinely get very far ahead. At the end of the day, college is a scam. It really is. In its current format, it's a scam. And I think that over the last few years, because of how far left many colleges have moved, and because of these far left movements taking over the colleges, the reputation of colleges have gone down the tubes. A lot of people aren't taking a college degree as evidence of intelligence. To extrapolate even further, saying that going to college is equivalent to being intelligent, we could also look at the example of people who have high IQs but are low-level achievers. And that is actually more common than you think, that people who have IQs above 135, even 150, don't tend to be as high-level achievers as their cognitive logical abilities. This is discussed in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. He talks about how after a certain IQ point, I think it's 130, maybe 125, it doesn't make a difference. You can score 180. It's not going to make a difference in your life, in your performance in life. And in fact, there is statistical data that shows that people who have IQs, super high IQs, end up not being high performers in the work environment because there are other aspects outside of IQ that end up contributing to somebody's success in the workforce. That's all to say that Sunny Hostin's point about how people who go to college are more well-informed, that more people should go to college, so they'll vote Democrat. That's really what she's trying to say. That's a red herring. That's just her way of further dividing the electorate between we're smart, we went to college, that's why we voted Kamala. Everybody else who voted for him, they're uneducated, they're dumb. That's why they voted for him, because you could only be dumb if you vote for Trump. And folks, that kind of rhetoric is why Democrats will continue to lose time and time again. They're elitist douchebags, buffoons, and I don't think there's any other way to put it.
Whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat. What stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can.
Wait, hold on.
The stats are the stats. She is so unbelievably arrogant. And that's why she's so unbelievably unlikable. These people are the worst representatives for their own cause. And you love to see it because they're utterly the worst. I mean, the left already eats itself, right? There's that meme. The left also shoots itself in the foot. Quite often. I think at the end of the day, what most conservatives and independents who are sick of this leftist bullshit, I think what we should do collectively is just let the left destroy itself, because it will not only eat itself, it will give regular, moderate, common sense voters more than enough reasons to never trust them or vote for them again.
Look, go ahead. I think most people are not saying that it was all about sexism and it was all about racism. Right. Most people are not saying that. I would say to Bill Maher, who I like, whose show I've been on several times, that maybe, just maybe, when you live life as a woman and as a woman of color, you feel it and you know it a little bit more than a white man does in America. And so I'm not saying, he says that folks see everything through the lens of racism and sexism. Not everything. But if you're not seeing racism and sexism in America, then you need to clean your lenses.
Oh, shut the fuck up. Is it really that hard to believe that the vast majority of Americans voted because they wanted a little bit more money in their pocketbooks? They voted because they saw just how awful the economy was, how everything was tanking under Biden, how this man is literally walking us at a Weekend at Bernie's pace into World War III, literally authorized yesterday. Long-range missiles, American missiles to be used with American intelligence by Ukraine to attack Russia. And Russia responded saying, hey, we'll nuke you guys. Is that what you want? Because we'll do it. We'll just write up new laws allowing us to nuke you. Really, like, you guys, it doesn't always come down to race and sex. The whole thing is that this is a losing argument. They're entrenched into this ideology that they're victims because of who they are. And they're powerless. It's honestly, I don't even think that they believe this. I think that it's just an easy way for them to try to gain the moral high ground. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's an easy argument that's a double whammy for them. They present themselves as victims while unconditionally villainizing the people who are admonishing them as the most vile thing that people could be in civilized society, racists and woman hating. It's one of those tactics that the left uses along with throwing those terms that end with phobia, right? Transphobic, homophobic, blah, 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 phobic, whatever it is. They come up with new terms all the time. It's these kind of roadblocks that they put in discourse to derail the conversation and make it impossible to get to an actual truth or have any sort of open discussion, because at the end of the day, they don't want to have those discussions. It's way more productive for them to just stonewall and avoid getting to the issues than it is for them to do this. And at the end of the day, it's pretty tyrannical in nature, because if you're constantly just trying to silence your opponents by any means necessary, be it by actually outlawing their speech or by actually having intelligence agencies reach out to social media platforms to ban and silence people who express speech that is opposing to your party's ideology, which they did to Twitter. And by making it impossible to have a conversation without it turning into some inflammatory accusation that you're being personally attacked just by presenting the truth or the fact of the matter, then you're not trying to have a conversation. You're just trying to derail.
This is something that I also find interesting, that when Democrats and liberals talk about race or sexism, it's immediately labeled as identity politics, which has a negative connotation. It's a term that Republicans have coined, and it's been very effective. But when Donald Trump goes to Miami and talks to Cubans, that's not identity politics. When Donald Trump goes to Dearborn, Michigan and promises Arabs something, that's not identity politics. When he goes to Jews and promises them the opposite, that's not identity politics.
Ana Navarro's retarded. That's a fact. There's a clear difference between what Donald Trump is doing versus what she is doing. Identity politics means retreating back into your identity so that you can have a line of attack on your opponent and essentially quell whatever policy, whatever argument, whatever rhetoric they're trying to share from their side. The difference between that and what Trump is doing is that Trump is going out and reaching to different demographics. He's appealing to different identities. Yes, you can look at it broadly like that, like a retard, but in reality, he's just appealing to those different demographics and he's trying to bring in as many voters as possible. There's a very clear distinction between both. And the reason why Ana Navarro can't distinguish them in this case isn't because she's dumb. I know I just called her retarded. She knows very well what she's doing, and it's dishonest. The ladies of The View right now are just throwing whatever they can at the wall and seeing what sticks. They're not as dumb as they present themselves to be, which is very dumb. I have to give them a little bit credit. I don't think they're that dumb. You don't get to be on daytime television as a political pundit, just spewing nonsense all the time. It's just that they're trying desperately to throw anything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And they're trying these old tactics from these old playbooks that have worked in the past, but don't work now because the American people have wised up. We've seen it. We've seen the lie being fabricated and the fact check coming right immediately afterwards, showing the truth. We've seen the dishonest editing that they've done of clips of things that Trump has said, and then the full clip. At the end of the day, they're the ones responsible for the crisis in reputation. And as long as they keep digging down and reinforcing, replaying this playbook, they're going to keep losing. And it's beautiful because they're going to go down in flames. And they're going to go down kicking and screaming. And nobody's going to care. Nobody cares right now. I beg you to find a single one of these ladies that is actually oppressed. These millionaire ladies with book deals, TV appearances, who live and likely own properties all over the United States, in Manhattan, in California, likely in Florida too, even though they talk shit about Florida. I dare you to find how they're oppressed. They're not. They're like the top 1% of the 1% in the country. Look, folks, The View is undeniably the worst show on television. I'm amazed that they're still on the air, primarily because their ratings are through the tubes. MSNBC is going out of business. Yesterday, their numbers were published by Adweek. Their ratings, it's lower than a Hassan Piker 12-hour stream on prime time. They're averaging sometimes dashes. That means that they didn't even hit, I think, 10 or 15,000 viewers on that specific program. They're getting nuked. And I don't think that they're going to go out of business because they're funded by billionaires. But at the end of the day, this is the moment. You either reflect, you get your shit together, and realize that your current strategy isn't working, or you're really just gonna disappear. And it's gonna be ugly to watch. I mean, look, AOC removed the pronouns from her bio. That's a big sign of change. So maybe it's time. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.